Hi, welcome. I'm Michael Bickert. Today I'd like to continue with our discussion of accountability and the notion of getting the most out of yourself, out of your people, and indeed out of your business. Before we get started, as always, I want to remind you to grab a sheet of paper and a pen so that you can make a commitment to jot down something. You can always pause the video so you don't miss anything. Pause the video, take a note, and take away something actionable, something that you can implement in your business today. That's the key. You only listen to the words here and you don't take anything away, then you've sort of wasted your time. We need to implement. Everything is about implementation. There's no shortage of good ideas in the world. Let's make a commitment to improve our business, to perpetually refine through the implementation of those things which inspire us. Okay, so without further ado, let's get started by recapping where we left off on our discussion of accountability. Before we had talked about holding ourselves accountable through other stakeholders, other people within the business, and having our team, making commitments to our team and inviting them to hold us accountable to that. And then with respect to holding our team members accountable, which is where we spent most of the time in the previous video. And incidentally, if you haven't seen that video, we'll put a link to it right here. One of the cards will pop up and you can link to that. But just as a brief recap, we talked about the importance of accountability through a three-strike system. And the concept is that you have to have good communication. You have to have a formal discussion with people when they fail to meet your expectations. You need to document the reason why. And in the first case, it's usually a case of clarifying your expectations, making sure that they have the proper resources, the training, the tools, and then it's more or less just a coaching session, and you document that. And then in strike two, we talked about the importance of progressive discipline, where it now becomes a reprimand. You, of course, start off by discussing what was the reason for the quote-unquote infraction, the failure to meet expectations. And it should no longer be a case of not understanding your expectations or not having the resources or the tools available to them. In fact, it is usually something else, such as negligence or apathy or forgetfulness, that kind of thing. And then we said, if it has to go to strike three after that, that you need to really turn up the heat, and that may involve termination of employment. But today I wanted to talk about a little bit different concept of accountability through performance analytics. So let's hold ourselves and our team members and measure and get the best out of our business through performance analytics. And, that's kind of a fancy business term for it, but what we're used to saying, if we keep it simple, is report cards. So let's just think of this in the school. What we're all used to in school, the context of school, is we talk about a report card. And you need to have a report card for your business. And you might say, well, that's what my financial statement is. And I would say to you, yes, indeed, your financial statement is your most important report card for your business. And you probably will look at your financial statement at least once a month, and maybe you spend some time doing some more digging down throughout the month. But a report card can take key elements off of the financial statements and other areas of the business. And so we're going to look at it and explore it in terms of how can we use report cards to get the most out of your people, yourself, and indeed your business. So when you think of a report card in your mind's eye, and perhaps I can, if you wish, in the comments, make a note, and I can do a more visual presentation where I can put up on the screen some samples of this. And you can certainly reach out to my team and we can develop templates specific to your business of report cards. But for now, I'd like you to sort of visualize how this might look. So the report card as a document, and of course it's generally going to be a digital document on your screen and your computer screen. That might be something as simple as a spreadsheet. How you get the performance metrics, the analytics that end up on the report card, is another discussion, and that's business specific and depends on what kind of technological skills and things you've set up. But the key that we're trying to get across here, no pun intended, is that you have to have a key performance index, KPI they call it, made up of key performance areas. So any number of metrics, any number of areas that you measure that indicate the trajectory of your business and whether or not you're on the right track. It's really important. And you, of course, your business needs that. You need that personally, and your management team needs it, and so do individuals. The first thing I would say to you is that you don't really need to differentiate much between your personal report card. If you are the owner, if you are the general manager, if you're the main person that's responsible for operating the business, then you could say that the business's report card, inclusive of the financial statement, is essentially your report card, because that's your job, is to ensure the sustainability of the business, the viability and the profitability of the business. And so whatever you come up with for the business is a reflection of your personal performance. However, you could make the argument that you have some things that are, you sort of wear multiple hats within the business. So you might want to have a couple of other things on your personal report card that hold your feet to the fire, hold you accountable, and are not necessarily on the business report card. It might be a more granular metric that you look at. It's something that you know that you slip if you're not held accountable. If you're not looking at the number regularly, you'll slip down a little bit. And you know that further down the road, that will have consequences, negative consequences that you don't want to affect. So it's okay to have a few extra key performance areas on your personal report card, even if you're the boss, and you don't have to have the exact same report card as the business. But I would sort of recommend in the beginning to keep it simple, that you as the entrepreneur, as the business owner, think of the business's report card as your personal report card. And then as we break that down and go down through the hierarchy, you look at your management team. So maybe you have departments, and your departmental report cards are in fact the manager's report cards. You think of those as individual businesses within under the umbrella of your business, and the same thing applies. And again, you can throw in a couple of extra key performance areas for managers who need that, who need to have their feet held to the fire, need to be held accountable for specific areas of performance that you might not be terribly concerned about. Remember the concept of a report card in terms of getting the most out of yourself, out of your people, and out of the business. It's meant for both the individual to know where he stands, to look at his own report card, as well as his supervisor. And then it's meant to stimulate action. And then as we go down, you would, within the department, you have, say, the operational team members, the people day to day. And you might want to differentiate them between productive employees. And when I use that term, we have to define that. I suppose what I'm referring to is people who produce maybe the service or the product that you sell. And so in the example of, say, a contracting business, one of the trades, maybe you're running a plumbing business, you have several plumbers, and you would think of a plumber as a productive employee. He's actually doing job, you're selling the inventory of the hours that he has to work in a day. And so again, going back to the differentiation, you might want to break out your people based on, are they a productive employee, or are they more administrative in nature and they don't per se produce something that you then resell? or are they in sales itself, and are they responsible for customer service and producing sales that end up in revenue, but they don't actually necessarily produce the product. And there's overlap there. It's really difficult to sort of think of this, and you have to assign what we're saying here to your business and figure out how it's applicable in your situation. So when I give these examples, maybe just stop and reflect for a moment. How does this impact your business, and how will this shake out? The key that I'm trying to get across, though, is that for report cards, everyone in the organization needs to have one. And what we were saying is, if you run an entire department, it's okay for the department's report card and the manager's report card that runs that department to be one and the same. And if you run an entire business, it is okay for the business's report card and that general manager's report card to be one and the same. If you're an individual within a department, you should have a report card that reflects your productivity and the value you add to the organization. So how do we do that? And let's get back to the visualization. So go in your mind's eye to think of how it will be laid out on a document. In the upper left-hand corner, what you would have is the objective that the performance metric is trying to measure. So where do you get your objectives from? You should have, for every individual in your company, a role description. So if you're a one-man operation, I would still recommend you have a role description. What is it you're going to do? And you might say, well, I've got to do everything with the business. But of course, your business plan lays out what that means. And so you should have a role description for yourself. And even a one-man operation relies on other resources. Maybe it's third-party contractors, and sometimes it's other family members and freelancers who assist. You need to break out what everyone is doing to help operate the business, and not just break out what they're actually doing. Instead, you should be defining it by objective. What is their objective? What are they trying to accomplish? If they've done their job very effectively, what will the outcome be? That's the way to think of the objective. And so going back to the report card, on the furthest most left column, you would have the objective listed there in one of the rows. And then in, let's say, column B, if you were using a common spreadsheet software, you would have the description of the performance metric that naturally will lead to the accomplishment of the objective. And it's okay to have more than one. So in the example of, say, you had a customer service individual, and we were looking at her report card, the objective that is documented may be to effectively handle incoming customer service inquiries and customer service tickets. And then when you move over one column and you're looking at the metrics that measure that, the top one might be the length of time that it takes to close a customer support ticket. Okay, so that's a measurement. It's quantifiable, operationalized the objective into a quantifiable measurement. And then underneath that, you might have the average score of or rating from the customer. Okay, so there's an example of having two separate metrics for one objective, and you could have 3 or 4, and we won't go through a whole thing. As I say, reach out to us if you'd like to view a template, or if you'd like to have one custom made for someone in your organization or for your whole organization. We'll do that for you. And then the next column over, so let's say that's column C, would be, what is the target? Okay, so we have the objective we're trying to accomplish, then we have a description of the metric, and then the target, the acceptable target, what we're trying to accomplish. So in this example, the metric may be the average length of time that it takes to close a customer support ticket. And by closing it, we're defining that as being it's resolved. The customer is now happy and has confirmed that their issue has been looked after. And let's say for your particular business, an acceptable number was within 1 hour, or another business might say within 24 hours, that's acceptable before it gets escalated within your system to a supervisor or something like that. And so that would be your target. That would be the measurement that you're looking for on the report card, okay? And then, and generally, how you come up with this is, it's not arbitrary, but it's based on experience. So there's nothing written in stone there. What you always want to try to do is you want to perform better than your competition, and you would like to perform better than your history. You want to be perpetually refining, continuous improvement. And so maybe take a look at, well, how long has it taken on average to close a customer support ticket, to resolve a customer service matter? And if you're not measuring that stuff, you need to start immediately so that you can develop an effective report card, and you will improve, and you will get better than the competition. You will get better than the business of the past. Each of your people will improve. So of course you have to measure. You got to figure out where are you going to measure that stuff. But for now, we'll focus on the report card and make the assumption that you're measuring that. So you would take a look at what has the average been historically, and maybe make a slight improvement for this quarter's report cards, or for this year's report cards. We want a 10% improvement over where we have been in the past, or whatever. And so that's what you would, for column C, as set as your target. And then column D, the next row over, or sorry, next column over, you would have, well, what is the actual performance? And the actual performance, it might be, well, last month, and it has to be, of course, for a particular time period. Last month, the average time that it took to resolve a customer support ticket was 35 minutes. Therefore, you are doing really, really well, okay? Or if your target was 1 hour and it was 90 minutes, then you'd be performing poorly. You will be not meeting expectations. Okay, are you seeing how this is starting to come together? It's really pretty simple stuff. But if you haven't developed something like this, a key performance index for each individual and each department and for the overall business, you need to stop now and put something together. You need to start measuring these things. I'm just going to go back a moment. We're going to get back into the report card in a second here, but I want to go back a moment and say that the metrics that you're looking at with respect to the overall business and for an overall department should be very much related to profitability, okay? So I wouldn't get too hung up on a lot of the various things that people do on a day-to-day basis. You can make a report card extremely complicated, and you can delve into every little thing that a person does and what your expectations are, how the business performs and everything. But when you're looking at the higher level, you're really trying to look at profitability, okay? So let's start with profitability, sales, expenses, those types of things. The size of your active database, your customers, how many leads you have. And then you can break it down a little bit more granular, like we've talked before when we spoke about performance analytics, okay? But it should be revenue and profitability based. Ultimately, if you have a report card that reflects for a business or a department that it's performing well and yet it's not profitable, that's a broken report card. That's not going to work. You need to go back to the drawing board and redesign it. Conversely, just being profitable in and of itself is not enough, because maybe you have been profitable for a long period of time and actually your growth is slowing down, your profitability is dwindling, and it should be cause for concern. So that's where in that column C, where we post the targets, you want to make sure that there's a continual improvement. There is some sort of pushing your boundaries and the envelope. You're trying to stretch yourself, get outside the comfort zone and improve, okay? So getting back to the report card, so we've got column A, once again, is the objective. Column B is a description of the performance metric that leads to the accomplishment of the objective. Column C is the target that you've established based on outperforming the competition and outperforming your historical measurements. And then next, what you want to look at, and you can do that, by the way, you can have last month and year to date and previous year, things like that. That's okay. So maybe you want C, D, and E to be different time frames, and you will put the actual measurement in there. But the next concept here, after you've recorded what your actual performance is, needs to be a weighting system, because not all the objectives will be equally important to driving your business to success. So what you need to do when you recognize that a particular objective is more important and always reflects more favorably on the overall trajectory of the business's performance, weight that more heavily. And it's just simple math, okay? So let's say in the example of a simple report card where you had 4 objectives you were trying to accomplish, and they were all equally important, then you'd have 100% weighting divided by 4 would be, each of them would be weighted 25%. But if you determined that, something was twice as important, then you need to assign a weighting to that that's twice as important. And that's with the objectives, but within the objectives, each individual metric needs to have a weighting, okay? So let's say in my example, the objective to effectively handling customer service incoming support tickets was weighted at 25%, and you had 2 descriptions of performance metrics, quantifiable measurements that lead to the accomplishment of that objective. You might say, well, each of those is weighted at 50%. That adds up to the 25%. I hope you're following me. This is pretty simple math, but it's I should probably have some visual aids on screen here. But you understand that everything adds up to 100%. Okay, so if there's 2 measurements that adds up to the 100% accomplishment of this objective, you might say, well, they're equally weighted, and we're going to give them 50%. 50% based on the length of time that it takes to close a customer service ticket, and 50% based on the average rating that the customer gives us, all smiley faces or 5 stars or whatever. Or you might say, no, it doesn't matter as much the time, because if a customer's unhappy and you resolved it very quickly, that's no good. And conversely, if a customer is very happy and it took a long time to resolve, then that's more important. So you might weight the customer rating higher. You might say that's 75% and the average time is 25%. The key here is to weight every individual metric. Everything you're measuring has to have a weighting that adds up to the score for that category. And you go so on down the line, working out all of the report card measurements. So I hope this makes sense. The more I start to speak about this, the more I realize it's really important to go through this with a visual aid. So I'll create one, and I will continue this discussion with an actual report card on the screen. You can follow along. But I wanted to talk about this right away so you can get started. You can start to think about, well, what is the role description for the individuals within the organization? And maybe there's only 2. Maybe, it's you and your partner. Maybe it's you and your spouse. Maybe it's you, your spouse, and a few kids that are running your business. Maybe you have 10 employees. You have to have a role description for everyone. Start working on that immediately if you don't. And the role descriptions are made up of a bunch of objectives. How do we know that this role is effective and successful? By the accomplishment of objectives. And then we'll break that down into a report card, okay, matching the description I gave. But the key is start with something. You can always refine it. Before we finish off this discussion, there's 2 really important things. And I think the segue is that you got to start somewhere. Okay, so don't worry about having a perfect report card before you get started. Start with something which is a visual representation of the performance of every individual, each department, and the business, which includes you. And what will happen when you present these numbers to somebody is they may disagree with the numbers, and they will prompt a discussion that will lead to improvement. So make sure that's clear with people up front. Don't tell them, well, this is written in stone and whatever I came up with as a manager. In fact, I would encourage you to involve your people in the creation of the report cards, although my observation is I haven't had a lot of success with that. I don't know if it's that thing where we're all a little awkward around being held accountable to particular things, or we want to make sure it's right. We're not sure what the boss is looking for or whatever. So I think it's sort of incumbent upon your HR team, you as a manager, but involve your people. That's the key. You have to involve your person to make sure that you create a report card that's meaningful to them. And so there's two things I want you to look out for in the creation of a report card. One is relevance, and the second is accuracy. Both of those things have to exist. So in terms of relevance, that's a really simple idea to understand, which is if it's on my report card, it should be relevant to what I'm trying to accomplish. If you say that my report card is going to include the amount of revenue in the ABC department, and I have no impact on that, there's no way I can affect that, then I might say to my supervisor, that's not very relevant for my report card. You know, I'm an administrative person, and I can see where that's important to the business, but is it really relevant to my report card or to my department's report card? So that's where relevance comes in. And the second thing is accuracy. Is you've got to figure out where are you taking these measurements from, and are they accurate? A lot of times what businesses will do is they'll have self-reporting. People will enter data into a spreadsheet or whatever, and is it accurate? And wherever it's coming from, it'll come out in the wash. It'll come out when you start to discuss it, especially in larger organizations, because peers hold one another accountable. So someone's getting praised and patted on the back for doing so well on the report card, and someone else is looking at that number going, I don't think that's accurate. Where did they get that number from? And then a discussion ensues, and that's how you perpetually refine these report cards. So remember that, relevance and accuracy in the data on the report cards. Then everybody knows where they stand, and you can continue. It's a dynamic thing. And that's another thing. You want to try to have these numbers as live as possible and as current as possible. So look for ways to accurately measure these things. And that's one of the nice things about designing a report card. It'll probably draw to your attention some things that are really important to your business that you're not currently recording, and you'll sort of kick yourself and go, I should have been doing this all along. So let's leave it there for now. I'm going to do another follow-up to this with some visual aids and a template of a report card you can follow along. It'll be mostly review of what we covered today. But to help me with that, please let me know where you disagree with this, where it didn't make sense, where it was a little too convoluted, or how is it that you are getting the most out of your people, your management, your frontline personnel, your productive employees? What measurements do you use? Let's help one another in the community through a discussion, through comments, through dissension, good, healthy debate. Different businesses do things differently, and we can all learn from that. So thanks for joining me today. Perpetually refine.